Recently, it's come to my attention that something that very much looks like poker cheating software is being advertised, sold, and very likely has a user base. So is this something we need to be concerned about? Let's take a look at it. I saw something recently that's a bit of a first for me. It was an ad on a big site, and it looked like it was advertising an RTA tool for poker. RTA standing for real-time assistance, so something that feeds you the correct play or some other kind of assistance while you play online. So I decided to take a look at the software, what it actually did, and I was a bit shocked actually that it was being advertised on a big site really openly. This is not a traditional solver that you'd use for reviewing previous plays or reviewing difficult spots. This is a full RTA tool, it seems. The software is called GTO Hero. Now, I did carefully consider whether to even name it in this video, whether to blur everything out in the clips of it, but I decided not to. Firstly, because the cat's already out of the bag, as we'll see in this video, but also specifically because of reasons that I'll give later on in the video in my final thoughts. I remember when Poker Tracker and the other poker tracking softwares went from just offering pure results tracking and some analysis tools to full-on HUDs, heads-up displays that overlaid onto the table graphics of the card room that you were playing at and fed you information, basically. Every serious player started to run a HUD. And I can remember a specific conversation that took place in a live casino tournament across the table once. This was when HUDs were pretty new, and one of the younger players at the tournament, he was a known player locally in that casino, and he was a really good player. And he was quite young at the time, probably in his late 20s, and he had started using a HUD in online games, and he mentioned that at the table. One of the older regs at the table felt so strongly about that. He just openly called him a cheater at the table, which, as you know, that's a bit of a strong thing to say in a casino, in a poker tournament. But that's how strongly he felt about a HUD, which a lot of people don't think anything of. Anyway, they argued a little bit about it and why it wasn't cheating, and the argument just faded away. The game took them away from the conversation, but that's illustrative of how HUDs were received by a lot of people. It wasn't on his own, this reg being annoyed by the thought of a HUD. It was quite a prevalent thing to think at one point when they very first came out. A significant amount of people did think it was an unfair advantage to have the computer feed you this kind of information. It's pretty essential when you were multi-tabling and things like that, though. People who were playing like 6-7 tables plus, you know, it was an absolute game changer to that kind of player. But that sentiment of it being unfair filtered right back down through to the poker sites, because some sites just started banning HUDs. Some sites still ban HUDs. They would deny service or even withhold funds in some scenarios because it was seen as unfair assistance. Prior to the HUD, software like Poker Tracker was just results tracking with some analysis involved. When they introduced the HUD, even from my perspective, to be honest, I was quite young when that happened. Even from my perspective, I felt like that did move into a grey area, if I'm honest. Is it cheating? No, not for me. Using a HUD isn't cheating, in my opinion, because it's only presenting you information which is actually available to everyone. The tendencies of the players at the table. But GTO Hero is doing more than that. It's not just feeding information which anyone can see in a neat and tidy way. It's feeding you something else. It's feeding you the actual play to make based on a GTO model. And you could say, well, yeah, that's what solvers do. Solvers recommend a play, but GTO Hero has a screen share option And that appears to be the real-time assistance option. So it's then feeding you the answer as you're playing at a table online. So it's not just presenting the stats of the other players and then it's down to the player themselves to decide the best play. GTO Hero is deciding the best play for you and feeding you that play. So that's RTA. But is it some sort of holy grail? Could someone take this to mid-stakes, high-stakes even, and beat those games with it? I don't think so. I don't think it's the holy grail, because I think it's giving you a base GTO answer without taking anything about your opposition into account in terms of their tendencies, mistakes they might be making, etc. I could be wrong in that assumption, and if somebody knows that I am, please let me know in the comments. I'd be very interested, but I don't think it's doing that. So if it's just churning out vanilla GTO plays, I think that at best it's going to be break even. It might be slightly plus EV at lower stakes, maybe. Having said that, it could probably provide a pretty good base if you're a novice player. It could probably take a struggling player to a reasonable place, because it would probably reduce their error rate to some extent. I'm speculating here because I don't know in practice. But what I do know is this. I'd say you'd have to be pretty trusting to screen share with an internet entity you don't know anything about in high stakes games. Anyway, let's move on to some final thoughts. Probably the most noteworthy or remarkable thing about all this is I think this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this being so openly advertised. I've heard unconfirmed stories in the past of things like this, RTA options, being offered to people in a more clandestine context. But this is the first time I've ever seen anything be completely openly advertised like this. From what I could tell, GTO Hero has actually been running ads for quite a while like this, which suggests they're making some money from it, which no doubt means there's people using it. They've got a user base, probably. But if ever there was an acid test about whether this can beat high stakes or even medium stakes, then it's this. If it could, then why even peddle it online? They could make a lot of money just by using it. Don't release it to the public, just crush games with it. So I think just based on that, you can conclude that, yeah, you're not just going to be able to load this software up and start cleaning up at high stakes online games. And having said that, given that it's just spewing out vanilla GTO plays, you're probably better off not even using it at low stakes either. At low stakes, players are making so many mistakes that you're better off just exploiting those mistakes than blindly following this pseudo-optimal strategy that is feeding you. So having looked at it, my opinion is that it's no threat at all, really. GTO Hero is a harmless piece of software in my opinion. If you want to learn to play GTO, then there's many legitimate options out there that help you to study that. You can look those up and use those. But when I said it's harmless, I meant it's harmless in terms of, are there going to be loads of people online beating you because they're using this? What is actually harmful about it is the fact that something like this is being openly advertised on big sites. That's not great for the game. That's the biggest concern for me. Not that it's going to turn somebody who doesn't know whether a straight beats a flush into some sort of like crusher. That's not going to happen. The concern for me is that it's damaging for the game to have things like this being advertised openly. At higher limits, should you worry about RTA generally? Not GTO Hero, but generally? Yes, I would say you absolutely should. But the thing is, the top level stuff that actually works and is not detectable by the sites and that sort of thing is no, and I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that kind of software. But there's no doubt that kind of software is not getting released to the general public and is not going to be advertising on big sites. Anyway, that's pretty much it from me on this. If there are any GTO experts watching this, I'm definitely not a GTO expert. But if there are any watching this and they've got a take on this, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment because I'd be really interested to hear what you've got to say. Anyway, thanks for watching.